This week on Windows Weekly, Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell talk about Microsoft's new commitment to security, just like their old commitment to security. They'll get it right. Give them a chance. We'll also talk about Apple's M4 with regard to the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite. Did Apple push out that M4 just to beat them to it? And Microsoft shuts down some more Xbox studios. It's all coming up next. And a lot more on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell. Episode 880, recorded Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. BC in a bottle. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Microsoft, and we're getting perilously close to build and an event and all sorts of stuff. But fortunately, our peerless prognosticators, our panel of peerless prognosticators is present. Did I get enough P's in there? Richard
That's
Campbell.
a lot of P's.
It's here. RunAs Radio.
I
And
have to go to the
runs.
bathroom. I'll be right back.
Very suggestible, aren't we?
They were popless peas, though. I appreciate
They were.
that.
I have a double pop filter. Also, Paul Thurrott, THURROTT.com. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hello.
Mary Jo Foley tweeted this morning, shitted this morning. That's with an X, so it's okay to say that.
We're going to save that for the end of the show because we're working on that.
I won't say
Unless
a word.
you're talking about something else.
I won't
Unless you're
say a
talking about
word,
the security
no.
thing.
Well, I think she said she was switching over to iPad now. I think that's what she said.
Okay, I don't think then someone stole her account because that'll never happen.
Hijacked her account.
I made an impassioned plea to Mary Jo for Apple products the last time I was in New York City, and she used a broom to sweep me out of the room.
Brusquely swept you from the room.
Yep.
Said, under no circumstances. You know what I have yet to do, and I should really do, is the ritualistic asking of Richard Campbell, where the heck are you today, Richard?
I'm home. Still home.
Oh,
yeah,
I can use the I'm home.
I'll do the flip
third.
shot. There you go.
Oh, my gosh. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a calm day on the ocean. Not a lot going on out there.
That's not a lake. That's a...
That's ocean water.
That's a
yeah.
bay.
That's that's Georgia Strait.
Gorgeous. Oh,
Yeah, Texada Island across the way, and
beautiful.
not far off, a little bit north of there, is the whiskey from this week.
Oh, well, there
Doing
we go.
BC today.
There we go. So the big story of the week has been Microsoft's security memo.
Yeah.
They'd love to
Anyone
do
else
these.
getting a sense of deja vu out of this one?
all over again. What's the story?
Somebody used the term in an article, and I had to look it up to be sure. Like, he didn't really say this, but they did. They are going to be secure by design, secure by default. And I'm like, you know what? Been around the block.
It's worth a
I've
try.
heard that before.
Do it again.
I've heard it before.
Keep doing it till you get it done.
So, yeah, like, what do you think people aren't paying attention? Is that like what do you think? History just started this week, and we don't know what happened in the past or something.
It's very weird.
Yeah. So, I guess I don't know what to say about this. I don't know enough about this to. Yes, I do. Screw me. I'm gonna be.
You
critical.
know enough, Paul. Tell us.
I don't. They just keep their eye off the ball. You know, they get focused on other things, and I think this falls by the wayside. And then something bad happens, and then we're going to get serious about it again. Satya sends out a memo to the press saying, if it comes down to security or anything else, we're going to do security. It's like, yeah, sure you are.
Well, it got leaked to the press. In theory, it's internal. I would argue this whole thing is actually an internal conversation, even if they're doing it in public.
A giant PR exercise that was pushed internally because it had to be. But
the nature of the attacks has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
in 2002, you're talking Code Red and Slammer and Anna Kournikova. They were all Windows propagation worms. They weren't particularly destructive. They certainly weren't ransomware.
I think you're looking at it in too detailed a form, because at a high level, honestly, it's exactly the same. It's we were doing things a certain way, The nature of the attacks on our products has changed. And now we have to do things a different way. Oh, and by the way, the byproduct of that is we're going to break things. And this is the way they, and by the way, I'm not arguing with, I think things need to break to get things into a better place. I think my central issue here is just that this is something that might have happened organically over time instead of being like an all-out emergency because they just weren't ready for it or whatever. But like I said,
I don't know. I think it's just a tone thing. They clearly have been fighting for a while. Against the state actors and the various organizations, and now that this latest round with the Blizzard one and so forth, where it's your house isn't in order. That's where the vulnerabilities came.
It is more serious, in the sense that the scale at which computing occurs now is so much more vast.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not claiming that when I woke up one morning to see the message that you've been hacked by the Chinese in my IIS web server, that it was in fact the Chinese government. I'm not saying that. I do agree that state actor sponsored, we'll call it electronic terrorism, is real and bad and needs to be addressed. Absolutely, I'm not. But again, the parallels here to me are just like painful. And you like to think we learn from history and whatever. And so we'll see. I unfortunately for Microsoft specifically, this is coming in the midst of, I think, what we would all acknowledge is an all-out assault on AI that is kind of a damn the torpedoes moment for them.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, actually, we're going to have to start paying attention to those torpedoes, and it's, I don't know. It's tough timing. So neat.
He managed to put a year between the AI memo and the security memo.
Yep. I mean, I don't know how many times you think we're going to turn this battleship on a dime, but it was rare enough when it happened with AI. I guess we'll see. And
certainly folks I know that are in the space, like that team seems to have slowly unraveled over the past decade or so.
Yeah.
The real change to the SDTs was like 2014. Up until then, when you saw a Microsoft security report, it was a definitive piece of work. It was like, this is how you write these things. And then that just stopped and has not been the same for a decade.
Yes. And for all the competition that occurs between the companies in this industry, there were always various levels at which they cooperated. And one of them, well, with some exceptions, one of them was the security stuff, right? That there is an officially accepted method by which we discover and then disclose vulnerabilities, and we do that in a responsible fashion. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Google maybe violated that principle several times with regards to Microsoft for what I view as kind of competitive reasons, which I thought kind of sucked. And I'm not sure. I don't know if Microsoft ever did it in return. I don't think they did, but there's stuff like that. But for the most part, Microsoft was a responsible player in that field, in that area, right? And I feel like you look at the stuff that's happened recently and you're starting to see what we used to see, which is like, we told them about this, we disclosed this to Microsoft like 14 months ago and they've never done anything about it. So now we feel like we have to go public because they're just not responding.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on over there. I mean, how would I? It's a big company, but
we are coming into build. Like Racinovich was burning up the Twitters this week, supporting Charlie Bell's talking about security is number one.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there'll be a new focus. Not that we will not be. I mean, it's still going to be 80 to 90% AI. Don't fool yourselves. But but maybe this will be a high level, high focus topic for them for the keynotes that they're going to have and for the news cycle. We'll see.
Yeah. But in the end, the stories are one thing, the actions are another.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Talk is cheap.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see what are you going to do differently? Like, I get it, but what are you doing differently? Because they did get criticized by Homeland Security for their response to some of these things.
Yeah. And tied to this, and again, the specifics are completely different. Like you said, they are, but at a very high level, kind of the same thing. I mean, one of the big pushbacks that I had with Microsoft, almost literally, it was over 20 years ago, let's call it 20 years ago, was they went through this process where they started to try to fix the security problems at the time in Windows. And they did so via a paid product, right?
Well, it's
Called
XP,
One
SP2.
Tear. Yeah, well, no, a paid product, like an add-on product, like the XP SP2 was a big chunk of it for sure. But you know, and my argument to them at the time was like, guys, like they bought something called, remember, it was like Giant Anti-Spyware or whatever it was called, and it turned into something, and now is Defender something, you know, because that name has been reused a million times. I don't remember the exact genealogy here, but you know, at one point it was like, you don't charge consumers, in this case, customers, to solve a problem that you caused. Like you put the vulnerabilities that are in Windows are your responsibility, and now you're charging us to fix them. This is how the mob operates. Like, you know, this is the lunch money thing with the bully at school. Like this is on you. Like we paid you for this product, it should work. You know, and they're doing it again. You know, and I you know, when Apple talks about you know, privacy is a basic human right. I mean, I think Microsoft's stance on this is security is a basic human right, and that this should be the baseline for their products. Like you can assume that if we release this thing, it's secure, and that security is part of the thing you're already paying for. It's not an add-on layer that we put on the top and charge you extra for. So there's it's more nuanced than I just described.
Yes.
And but I still see this kind of push and pull between them wanting to charge extra for more security or better security, whatever, however you want to describe it. It's like, guys, I don't know. It feels like a bad stance to me.
Yeah, and there's always been paid security products inside of Azure, and it's been this fun line where it's like, why is that one free and this one paid? Like, what's the difference there? And usually it comes down to the people involved. You know, there are teams that you pay for access to, and where product stuff is generally just included.
Yep. I mean, look, it's hard enough to differentiate two versions of a product or whatever it is. You know, you can go off the deep end, like Office did and kind of still does, or Windows did for Vista and Windows 7, where you have, like, you know, too many of them. You know, it just seems like a money grab. And security, I think it's even harder in a way because so I can have seatbelts, but I have to pay for them. Yeah. Like what? Like you know, it's tough. It's a tough one.
And to be clear, you always do. It's just a question whether it's built into the price or not.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's in some ways it's largely a perception issue, I guess, because by pulling it out and making it an add-on SKU or whatever, it just feels.
Yeah, and part of me, I mean, I usually read these things with you are maneuvering in public to encourage your company to do the right thing, which seems to be a pretty common theme these days. Like that's kind of the thing they have to do. It's a big company, right?
Yes, and right, and that big security event from early this year where we kind of speculated, and I'm still positive we're correct. You know, you have this company where you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably of these little VMs that engineers spun up once to test something. They're sitting there on some edge network or wherever they are with varying levels of controls and getting out of date as time goes on or whatever it is. And then they're all little vulnerability points. It's what Microsoft, you know, we call the attack surface, right? It's hard to get on top of this. And it's not I don't know how you feel. I mean, honestly, it is a hard problem, but
there is no perfection here, right? Like you can't answer the question, you know, is this secure? Like you can't. All you can do is say we have made an effort.
We're doing the best we can. We will respond as quickly as we can if something goes wrong. And hopefully AI will be used for good in this instance, where they can use it to kind of proactively monitor networks and devices and whatever else.
Well, and the response should be good. Like there's no reason for writing a bad root cause analysis. Like that's the one that gets me. Is like in the end you don't publish anything. Or you do, but it's, you know, half the story. Like just tell me you've done the diligence.
Unfortunately, this particular incident reads a lot like they're only telling us as much as they have to at every point in the way, and that by a year later we'll know the full story, and we'll wonder why they didn't just say it in the beginning.
Well, and my instinct when we were talking about the Midnight Blizzard thing was there's government involved here. And that's impeding
there's some
them.
sensitivity there.
Yeah, but it argues for that there are ways to request information from the government too. Like
and I don't follow this part of the market that closely, but sometime in the past year or so, Microsoft explicitly just said, look, we're going to start naming names. In the past, we might have been kind of vague, like, and said state actor, if we didn't know, or even if we knew exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And oftentimes now they'll say, yeah, Russia, the government of Russia did whatever, the government of China, whatever it might be.
The coyness is gone, right?
Yeah.
They are naming the hacking group. They are naming the state sponsor, which again, it's not, but even seeing intelligence organizations doing this now too, like they're having the same problem where they don't feel like they're being taken as seriously. So it's like, fine, we'll say it in public then.
Because nobody trusts their government anymore and haven't probably for 40 years or whatever.
And to be clear, that is an American phenomenon.
Oh, do you think so? Okay.
Oh, yes. Very aware. Been spent a lot of time with a lot of different countries, and Americans have been carefully educated that their government is incompetent to the point where they make it come true.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I think our government is incompetent, but but that's fine.
Just because you've made it come true doesn't mean it has to be that way.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I wish it wasn't that way. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully, but I think they make themselves, whoever we're talking about, security agencies or Microsoft or whomever it is, naming names. Like, yep. I mean, transparency is transparency. Partial transparency is not transparent.
Right.
So it's translucent. Anyway, so there you go. I don't know. I don't know. I think is all I can say to this. It's hard for me not to be cynical about this. I think because of the history.
Oh yeah.
But I agree. It is, we live in a much more dangerous world, and the scale at which Microsoft's infrastructure reach makes it even.
Well, and I think this is part of the difference between now and 20 years ago. It's like you are now truly this multinational monster and one of, a handful of companies that lead the telecom infrastructure in a lot of ways. In the internet.
The concerns of 2020, whatever that was, 2 to 4, whatever, were individual PCs. They were companies. We didn't really even call them data centers for the most part, I would say. At that time, we had whatever internal infrastructure that we had, and they were just loose, small targets all over the place that were hard to attack in some ways. I mean, they were easy to attack if you could find them, but Microsoft has got a pretty big bullseye on them.
Yes, and always has from that point forward.
Yep.
So they listen. There's maybe 100 people in the world that are genuinely good at this, but there's only a dozen places in the world where they should work. Microsoft's one of them.
That's true. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's you mean there's a downside to the cloud? I just wow.
Yep. Just like there's a downside to to Windows getting such a large market share.
That's right.
It became the primary target.
Yeah.
There are 3 clouds that matter, maybe 2. You think they're not targeted? You're bloody right they are.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see this year how this goes. I mean, I don't think that there was a lot of talk about security last year. I think this year there's going to be a lot of talk about security.
And I do think it's a hijacking. That this is not was the plan for build. I think there's a big chunk of build being
not at all.
Right
this absolutely was not the plan. Yep,
I'd be interested to see if they go more than the lip service. Like this could be 3 minutes in Satch's keynote, or it could be half an hour.
50%. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's going to be very interesting to see.
Well, and if I was in Satch's shoes, you've just done a trustworthy computing letter like Bill did back in the day, it's every team has to have some sentences. Every demo has to have some reference to security throughout.
Okay.
That would give me more confidence. I don't need him speaking about it for half an hour. I need every single person that gets up there.
Right. We'll have different groups up on stage, and then we'll obviously.
And here's our role in the security space. Here's how we work with this.
Here's the aspect of this topic that has to do with scam. That's fair. I didn't
talk about the passkeys because I've walked around this a few times now because it's a mess.
All right, listen, this one. I just want to welcome all of you to my personal hell. So back in December, I did update the Windows 11 field guide for all of the big new features that came out in what we call 23H2. It technically came out right before 23H2, but whatever. One of those features, one of the more innocuous features, was passkey support right? Which is one of those things, if you're a normal human being, a user, and you use Windows 11 every single day, you would never even know this happened, right? But I'm not a normal person. I'm a maniac. And so I was determined to figure out what this meant. And it required me to keep going further and further down this rabbit hole to understand what it was I was seeing here. And I wrote what I think are honestly some of the best things I've ever written in my life, in the sense that I think I explained very complicated technology in a very clear fashion. But it required, it was awful. Like, it was awful on me. And I went back and I do what I do, which is go back again and again and test it on different machines, make sure it's, whatever, make sure I understand it, make sure it's happening the way it's supposed to. The passkey support that's in Windows 11 is a joke. It's stupid. It's pointless. There's nothing to it. There's no reason to even know it exists. And the fact that I spent time on this kind of still bothers me in a way, but I had to, because that's, like I said, this is what I do. But the point of having passkey support in Windows 11 is that a key aspect of passkeys is that you have a local, secure, known good authentication method for an online account. And on your mobile devices, that will be Touch ID or Face ID, like on an iPhone. It could be whatever they call it on Android. They have the same things to different degrees. I mean, for some reason on Android, the touch thing seems to be a lot more secure more often, if that makes sense. It's only in recent years with the face, whatever they call the Face ID, the facial recognition, has started to catch up. But in the Windows world, we've had Windows Hello for a long, long time. And the reason that Microsoft includes a PIN as a form of Windows Hello, even though it's not, biometric, et cetera, but it's another level of proof, if you will, that you're you.
Specific to the device. Yeah.
Specific to the device, right? Which is what passkeys are all about.
Specific to the account.
So one of the key things I discovered was that if you sign into a Windows 11, then I don't believe that Microsoft documents this anywhere, by the way, but if you sign into a Windows 11 PC with a Microsoft account, it creates a passkey for that account on the device. That Microsoft has, in effect, been using the predecessor to the passkey for years as a form of pass-through authentication. It's the thing in Windows that allows you to go into Microsoft Edge or a Microsoft Store app and have your authentication pass through to it. You have proven who you were through our Windows Hello. You have authenticated yourself. It's not, you have, it's a low level of proof, but through a combination of things. The first time that you signed in, you did like a 2FA, hopefully with your phone and whatever it was. Now we've established that you are the person in this chain. You are authorized to do these things on behalf of this user account. It's a pass-through authentication. So when Microsoft announces that they've added passkey to support to Windows 11 or to a Microsoft account, a lot of people are like, hold on a second, I thought we already had that, and we didn't. And the fact is, if you go to the Microsoft account website up until like a week ago, and you went through that process, because one of the articles and one of the new chapters I got out of this was how to properly secure your Microsoft account. Microsoft has supported passwordless authentication methods and what we'll call like alternate sign-in and verification methods for years and years. They allow you to remove your password if you want. You should configure it properly before you do that. And I don't see any good reason to do it, but you could do that. And but passkey, technically, literally, a passkey was not one of those methods.
Even though
one was created for you,
passwordless, which is
it's a form of password. It's a form of passwordless, right? So in other words,
I already have
it was not
passwordless, but
yes, right. That's one way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about, like, we could spend hours on this, and this is not the right time or place for this or whatever, but the simplest way to think about this, just to put it in perspective, is you're on your computer and you're signing into Stripe or PayPal or Amazon or whatever it is, and you have some sort of a two-factor something. So you have a username and a password, and it says now we get a prompt on your phone. So you pick up your phone, and you might have gotten a text message, which isn't super secure. You might have a Microsoft or other authenticator app. It uses the secure authentication method on your phone to ensure that you're you. This is the chain of security. And you type in a code, or you say yes, or whatever it is you do, right? Different methods, different things. You could have a security key is another way to do it, but whatever. But most people are going to use the phone. It's pretty convenient. It's secure and reasonably convenient, right? The beauty of a passkey is that it's on the device you're using, so that once you create it, you can use it again and again and again. So if you sign in securely, as you would with Windows Hello, and you have to re-authenticate against an account you already have a passkey for on the device, you don't need your phone. It's super convenient and secure, right? It's more convenient. Not that using the phone is super inconvenient, but it's even more convenient than that. Passkeys have downsides. They're not technically portable, although password managers have figured out how to do that themselves without using a standard because it doesn't exist yet, et cetera. But whatever. They're one way. They're a method. They're better than just using a password. That's for sure, right? So now Microsoft is supporting passkeys with the account. Like, nice. All right, here we go. Good. They've closed the loop, So I go in and I go through this process again. And I was in there. I thought I was going to write a little quick article, like hands-on with this feature, 2 hours went by and I came out. I walked out of the bedroom. I was working on the bed for this, and good thing I was already laying down. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Nope." I said, "Remember back in December when everything went south with the security stuff and I spent like 6 weeks on this and I almost turned into an insane person." I'm like, it's happening again. Like this something is not right here. I can't figure out what's going on. Like, this is not working consistently. It's not proper. And then I looked at Microsoft's documentation, and here's what I found out. It's not fully implemented yet. They wanted to have something to announce on Password Day last week, so they shipped it. And this thing is not fully implemented yet. So passkeys right now on a Microsoft account are supported on desktop and mobile web browsers only. They're not supported in apps. What?
So not ready is what I hear you saying.
It's not ready.
Yeah.
This is like if you sent in this paper in school, your teacher would have put a C on it, handed it back, and said, "You can take this grade. You can work on it for another week and come back. We'll talk."
Yeah. Call me when you have more done.
Yeah. So I actually wasted time on this, and that really makes me upset. So boy. So I don't know what to tell you. Now I know Richard and I think Leo both use Bitwarden. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people use 1Password, use Dashlane, all of these things, some version of all of these things
just
support
have to be different, don't you?
Passwordless methods of authentication, including for passkeys. If you save like when you go to a site or whatever it is, or you're on your phone, you're an app, whatever, and you sign into an account and it offers to save a passkey, your password manager, at least the one I use, I assume it works the same for all you guys, will jump in the way and say, it's almost like someone catching the ball right in front of you. We'll take that passkey, thank you, and we'll save it in your, secure password manager, and it will replicate to all of your devices that you use the password manager on, right? This is the portability element. This is the thing you don't get with passkeys natively. And you can bypass it. It's actually a little bit hard depending on the device and the app, whatever it is, but you can bypass it if you wanted to save it right on the device. But, I think getting it into, in my case, Dashlane is the right way to do this. The FIDO Alliance is working on a standard to so that this thing is implemented the same way everywhere, and you can even someday we'll be able to share passkeys for some reason. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To not beat this to death, I'll just say, don't worry about this. If you're concerned with the security of your Microsoft account, you should be. Please go to my website and read the article, How to Properly Secure Your Microsoft Account. It talks about all the different passwordless and secondary authentication and verification and sign-in methods that Microsoft offers, and implement multiple versions of those things. Don't do passkeys, not yet. When they fully implement this thing, we'll have another discussion about it, because right now this is about as half-assed as it can be. And it is very upsetting to me that they ship something in this state.
But this does remind me of what FIDO keys were like the first iteration or so. In fact, FIDO keys are still pretty rough.
Yeah, but you know what? So I don't remember in the early days, but here's the thing. The interface for this hasn't even been updated. So if you go into your Microsoft account website, go through the security process, go to the security dashboards, go to advanced security and say, I want a new method, a new way of signing in or verifying myself. The thing you have to choose does not say passkey. It says face, fingerprint, PIN, or security key. It does. Then it says under it, use your device to sign up with a passkey, because those things are now technically using passkeys under the covers. They're admitting it here for the first time, but it doesn't say passkey. That's not what the choice name is.
They left that word out.
Guys, come on. come on.
Yeah. No,
So anyway,
it's a good one.
This is the whole problem, by the way, with Passkeys. I took one look at it. I wanted to turn it on, and I gave up.
And
it's why Passkeys is a. I'm sorry to say, DOA.
I think they're going to make it, but yes, the
Really?
problem
not with this version. Yeah.
A problem with Passkeys is that they are inconsistently implemented. Right. We talked about GitHub as an example of an organization that does it correctly. Google started off great. The stuff they were doing in Chrome, it was where they pushed it out to probably hundreds of millions of users. Fantastic. Now, I don't know what happened behind the covers. Now I have so many problems trying to authenticate with a passkey with Google now. I think I'm just going to turn it off and start it over. I don't know what they've done. That's gone horribly wrong. So yeah, it depends. And I don't have this much energy or time, but I'm sure that password managers all have different experiences, whatever. I'm very happy with the way Dashlane works. I know you guys like Bitwarden, and I hear from 1Password people. Right. Yeah. If you like it, you're used to it. That's what you should use. Use the thing you're familiar with. This is important. But as for just passkeys in your Microsoft account, don't. There is no benefit to doing this right now. There are terrific and safe ways to authenticate yourself for your Microsoft account. And a Microsoft Authenticator app is one of those ways. And probably the best way for most people.
Yeah,
So
I was reminded the other day of I was reminded the other day of how well like Facebook does this. When I signed in on a different machine to the Facebook account, and my phone popped up with a, "Hey, is that you signing in?"
Yes,
and just
in the app, from the app, right?
Yeah,
that's
from
right.
the Facebook.
That's very similar to the model Apple uses, where if you have to authenticate against Apple, I'll get them on my Apple
another
TV.
device.
It's weird. Like they'll come up on any Apple device.
Yeah.
It's like.
But it's like they're using an authenticator app without using an authenticator app.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what people want.
You want something familiar. It's nice. Like if you switch phones and you want to sign into Facebook or Instagram, does the same thing, right? That's one of the ways you can authenticate yourself. Now, of course, you switch phones and you've already wiped out your first phone. And it's like, okay, go to your other Facebook app. And you're like, I don't have another Facebook app.
Yeah. And then it'll take you to a much different path.
Yeah. It's a different experience. It's
very much a challenge now to migrate
the East
devices.
German room with the handcuffs on the wall. Yeah. And we'll see how this goes. But
yes, we will ask the questions here.
Security's hard, and it's inconsistent, and passkeys are just the ultimate security technology because they're all that stuff. So
yeah, I'm nicely in a tangle between Microsoft Authenticator, Bitwarden, FIDO keys, and my mangled set of tenants on Microsoft.
And then the randomness, like the one you just said, Facebook being the perfect example. Every once in a while, like I guess I'm authenticating this way.
Yep.
It's just and whatever. At least it's there. At least it's not just a username and password, right? And later on, I think at the end of the show, I'm going to talk about a password manager that I do not use, but we're starting to see in password managers these features where it will go out and examine your accounts and say, hey, you have like 17 accounts that you could be using with 2FA and you're not. Why don't we set that up right now? And that's such a great feature, right? Yeah. Because this stuff is hard. And Tuesday, we don't have 2FA on this one service, but next Monday we do. And how would you know that?
Yeah.
And so it's neat to have something working on your behalf in the background as well for this kind of stuff. So,
and curiously, and this will come up towards the end of the show, like this is kind of the show I did for RunAs too, but at the sysadmin level, we're talking about identity governance because it is evolving and it's hard. There's no two ways about it. And again, like the consumer conversation is hard. You should see how we're tormented in IT right now. Like it is a state of affairs. I was on a influencer call with a bunch of Microsoft folks, and I used the phrase tenantitis.
Nice.
I got a lot of pings on that one. Apparently, that's going to be a word now.
Yep, that is.
And I was like, I think it already was a word. You guys just hadn't heard it before. But look, some of us have multiple tenants, and we are suffering.
That's brilliant.
All right.
That's a perfect word.
Let's I'll tell you what, here we go. I've got my meta
let's pay the bills.
working. I am looking a little bit like James
And you
Bond.
don't look anything like a nerdlinger, so that's good.
Everything's fine.
Wait a minute. Let me take a picture of that person. Got it. Okay.
Hey, where's
Whoa.
Waldo? Oh, there he is.
There he is. You just need a hat.
I bought the most
Sit down,
nerdy ones I could
Waldo.
find, so it would be obvious I was wearing these. Oh, I'm hearing messages. Do you hear?
Yeah, we're all hearing messages.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mine are little pop-ups that say, hey, you know what? You're trying to sign in to Stripe, right? Nope.
Yep. Okay. And of course, it's all tied into my Facebook account for real security. And I like that.
Love
There
it.
you go.
Let's talk about real security. Let's talk about Collide. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Collide. You've heard us talk about Collide before, but have you heard that Collide was just acquired by, we were just talking about it, 1Password. That's pretty big news because these are two companies that lead the way in creating security solutions that put users first. And now, hand in hand, they march forward into the future. For over a year, Collide Device Trust has helped companies that are using Okta, which is by the way, that's great, but it only authenticates users. You have to add Collide to authenticate their devices, and that's so cool. Collide Device Trust makes sure that companies with Okta can ensure that only known and secure devices access their data. And they're still doing that. Part of 1Password doesn't make, in fact, it's better, right? They have the resources. Now, if you have Okta and you've been thinking about checking out Collide, this would be a really good time. Let me tell you, it's very easy to get started with Collide. It comes with a library of pre-built device posture checks, so you can get started immediately, all the stuff everybody would want, and then it's easy to write your own custom checks. So if you've got specific hardware or software that you really want to make sure is secure, you can add those posture checks as well. Just about anything you can think of. Plus, and I think this is really great, you can use Collide on devices without MDM. That means your entire Linux fleet, contractor devices, and of course every BYOD device and laptop in the whole place. Now that Collide is part of 1Password, things are just gonna get better. Check it out at Collide, Kolide, Collide.com/WW. Get it? Windows Weekly. To watch the demo today. That's KOLIDE.com/dubdub. That way they'll know you heard it here on Windows Weekly. Collide.com/WW. We thank him so much for the support of this guy right here, this band, this cat, this legend, little Paulie Thurrott.
This security stuff is like my Waterloo. You know, I'm going to go down on this one.
It really is.
But I'm trying.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I'm trying. It's hard.
So these glasses have really actually, it was Mike Elgin that told me to get these. He said they sound really good, and they do, but they look really nerdy.
Yeah.
I should have gotten the Michael Caine ones. I should have gotten this big.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm listening to music. You can't even tell, can you?
Well, you're kind of dancing a little in your seat, but yeah, I mean, I can't hear it.
Yeah, you can't hear it? Okay. Maybe if I put my...
Nope.
No, nothing.
No. That's good. That's really surreptitious. So if
Yeah.
you're having dinner with somebody and you're kind of bored, you can turn on a baseball game.
Thing. Yeah.
So years ago, when Brad and I worked together at our little company, we'd have our weekly meeting. I was describing this to Richard, actually. And we would play Call of Duty during these meetings together.
Oh, my God.
And,
Nice.
and then, I don't know, 3 months in, and we talk because we're listening to them, but we're playing the game,
Mhm.
And then 3-6 months, whatever it was, some amount of time later, our boss was like, I think like everyone in the team would really appreciate it if you guys you're there, you can tell you're involved and everything, but like I think they want to see you, you guys should be on camera. We're like, ooh.
No.
It's like,
Now you're ruining everything.
yeah. And so for a little while, we had that moment where we're like, we'll try to make this work. But then one of us would be like, and they're like, Paul, that was a crazy gesticulation. Everything okay? And you're like,
fine. Yeah.
and then you had to just say like, we got to stop doing this.
Or at least no more ambushes so you don't get that.
Yeah.
excited.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is with the meta glasses, I mean, go for it. But at some point, someone's going to be like, are you okay? Because you're going to be like jitterbugging around the room or something. And it's going to be like, what's going on over there?
I'm playing Call of Duty right now. Well, I want to compare,
I'm on a 10 kill streak right now.
For the cost of one Vision Pro, I could pretty much get everything on the market today. And I wanted to compare them. These are about $300. I couldn't get them with my prescription because my prescription is so strong it wouldn't do it. So I just got clear ones, but I'm wearing with contacts.
Mm-hmm.
I got the Brilliant Labs ones. Those do have my prescription in them. Same idea. Those have a heads-up display. This does not. This you don't see anything. This is just normal. It's all ears. Okay. But you can do things like, hey, Meta, tell me what I'm looking at right now.
Right.
That's a tough room to look at.
I would do that when you meet someone you haven't seen for a while, you've never met before, you're standing there in the room, you're like 2 feet away from them and they're talking to you and you go, hey, Meta,
it says
what I'm looking at right now.
It says you are looking at a room displaying multiple screens with various content, which is true. That's what I was looking at. Mm-hmm. When I looked at this, it said you are looking at a box with 2 antennas on it, which it kind of is. It's a TV.
This is the heads-up display that the Terminator had,
Yeah.
There you go.
It's like, boop,
but it's not
boop,
heads up.
Zero.
It's not showing it here. It's all.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, it's the same, but in effect, right?
I think it's cool. And then I could take pictures or movies. The cameras are right here. And when I take a movie, it should light up. Yeah. See, you can see there's a little blue light on there that tells you that I'm watching you.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's, and I
would like to think after 17 years or whatever it's been that you're watching me. Sometimes at least, I don't know.
Anyway,
I would like the idea, a projection of a movie, like in a plane or something. It would be kind of cool. That could solve some problems.
Yeah. That would be the Vision Pro you're looking for. That's $3,500.
That causes problems.
Actually, it's not $3,000 because you can go to eBay now and get it for $1,000 off.
Nice. Right. What price you sold, though, Liam?
Yes.
What price you sold?
No, these are interesting. I also got the pin, the rewind pin. They call it Limitless now. Did not get the humane pin. I learned. I'm not.
I like the idea that like you make a mistake in public. Maybe you're sitting at a bar, you say something stupid, and you like rewind.
Yeah.
You're like, how come that didn't work? Everyone's still laughing at me.
Yeah. Works great on a podcast. Not so good in real life.
Yeah. I don't understand how technology works.
Yeah. Not the same thing at all.
All right, let's get back to work. Enough.
Sorry,
Meta.
Sorry, enough screwing around.
We got Microsoft. We got Windows 11.
Yes. Not a lot in the way of hard news, as I'll call it. We had one dev channel build last week, and then we just got a Canary build today. Neither one of these are profound in any way. Today's Canary build was just about bringing over features we already saw in the beta channel. They're really, this is weird for me. I keep mentioning that I use this feature called Nearby Share in Windows all the time. Like I love it.
And you're the only one.
I am the only one. I think they made it for me. I appreciate it. I use it for the book.
Very kind of them.
Love it. I just installed the Android version of this on my Windows PC so I could do it between my phone and my computer, right? It's you go to the share sheet or whatever they call it in Android, and one of the things that will pop up is, now they call it Quick Share, but you go into that and your Windows PC will show up and you can say, I want to send this file. I want it, whatever it is, right? It's nice. But there is a system-wide share feature in Windows that debuted back in Windows 8, and almost no one ever uses it, right? And so one of the things we've come up with that we've talked about is how Microsoft is manually adding apps like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger to it because those app makers, who are the same app maker, did not bother to support that platform feature in their Windows apps, right? Right. Nearby Share is another tough one. There's other stuff. So there's all these like little share things they've been adding lately, which I kind of think, it's kind of an idea. We joked about the Gmail yourself feature, right? We talked about look, we're Windows guys.
Companion app for this too.
It's just built into the system. It's just you right click on something, share, and one of the things is like just Gmail it to yourself. It's like we've come full circle. So they added one of the ones they added from beta that's now in Canary is you can generate a QR code to share, and it's like so you send someone the code and they scan it. And I seriously, can we just admit that no one's ever going to use these things and just don't? It's just stop. We don't.
How does the QR code even going to work? Does that mean it's on OneDrive or something? Like,
yeah, it's where does it exist?
Yeah,
I mean, like I
get the QR code has a URL in it, but what's the URL to?
It's a OneDrive.
Your phone?
Yeah, it's a OneDrive. Yeah, in other words, like if you get the email on your phone with a QR code in it, how do you scan it?
Yeah, that's a problem.
You print it and then you scan it with your phone.
There you go.
It's ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous.
You fire up the companion app to be able to view the graphics from the phone so that you can use the phone to scan the QR code.
I assume in your email app, no matter what device it's on, you could just click something and it would go to
you would
page,
hope.
right? I don't know. So that's fun. And then there's a bunch of Copilot improvements, which may or may not ever make it into the product. But one of those things is that Copilot acting like an app feature where it, get this, it's a floating window and you can resize it. And, you can resize it now, but it's, instead of it being a pane, it could be a real
just
pane,
a window, a normal window.
A window, an app window. Yeah.
Put it where you want.
Yep. Nothing cool.
The real question is, can it remember that I put it there so that I don't have to put it back there every flipping time?
That is a hard computer science problem. That's actually one of my biggest pet peeves. There are apps like Notion as an example of that, where you maximize it, let's say, and you close it. You come back later and it goes to that size, but it's still windowed. It's not maximized.
Right.
And the reason that bothers me is I solved that problem in my own apps many years ago. Like I know how to fix that. And I'm not that good of a developer. I'm not a professional developer. Like what? I mean, it's, it's just out there for you to fix. Like why isn't that? I don't know. And then in the dev channel, nothing big. Again, CFRs, we're starting to use CFR technology everywhere because we like to keep Windows users on their toes. We don't know what you're going to see in your computer, and neither do you. It's fun.
CFR technology?
What's that? CFR
what
technology?
What is CFR technology?
CFR, controlled feature release. And the control part, it's an RFR, meaning a random feature release, because there's no control to it. It just goes out randomly.
Well, this is only because you have multiple machines. Most people just don't see it or they have it.
That's right.
The other.
But if you had one machine and you had whatever configuration it was and something was going wrong and you went to someone in your family who's your support person, or you go to someone in your business who is that person and you say, hey, something's not working. They're like, okay, we'll click this button. You're like, I don't see that button. And that's the problem with CFRs.
Yeah.
Right. For this to make sense, everyone should have the same thing. Like that's
there's a case for why you do this way is that you test features on a subset of the population. So you have a smaller rollback.
Okay. Fair enough. No, you're right. I mean, you are right. I mean, of course you're right. It's just
that's
that they're
theory,
using it.
But I totally appreciate the fact that
everywhere.
You create asymmetries.
That's right. Look, I mean, in the old days when we actually had that one major release a year or whatever it was, and they didn't call it this at the time, but it was like a staged rollout.
Yeah.
And the idea that the way they described it at the time was, we know through our telemetry data that certain PC configurations are going to have a higher chance of getting this thing in a high quality way without any problems, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to go to those guys first. And as the data comes back, we'll expand the reach of this thing. And over time, we will deploy it to everybody.
Well, and in theory, the insider set is your staged release, right? Like that's why we're insiders.
That would require them to respect that. And they don't. So the way they do a lot of things now, they moved it into the insider program, is to use CFRs, and CFRs do not take into account the configuration of your computer. They just send them out randomly. So it's stupider, and that's the end of that sentence, because there's no but. It's just stupider. It's just it's stupider. It's not sophisticated. It's not good. And actually, there was a cumulative update that went out recently, and this is a good example of why the current way that Microsoft tests releases isn't great, because they broke a bunch of VPN connections with the Patch Tuesday update from last week. Right? I think I put this in the notes. We're between milestones, right? So we always have to keep a little focus on where we are in the release schedule. Last week was April's Week D update, so it's a preview version of the Patch Tuesday update we'll get next week. Next week is Patch Tuesday. So we're in that dull time between releases, if you will. And this is the time where we start cleaning up the mistakes. And one of those mistakes was that this was actually April Patch Tuesday, not the preview update. So 5 weeks ago, I guess. No, 3 weeks ago, whenever it was, when they released the Patch Tuesday update in April, they broke a bunch of VPN, they being Microsoft.
It sounds like they're not breaking third-party VPN stuff. They're breaking their own.
Yeah, they're breaking. Well, I think it is also third-party, but yes, it is people are starting to see VPN errors. So, they'll fix it eventually. Well, they'll probably roll it out.
You're still using a VPN? Isn't everything in the cloud?
Yeah. There's, there are reasons to use VPNs, I guess.
I'm well aware.
Yeah, well, right. Actually, the amount you travel, you know better than anybody.
Yeah.
So Steve did a whole thing on that yesterday on the VPN issue. I don't know if it's the Windows 11 one.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a bigger problem with VPNs where apparently some
option 121. Steve debunked it, by the way, just so.
Oh, I'm actually very
knows.
glad to hear that because my understanding was that was not going to be easy to fix.
It's not a bug. It's a feature that's always been in there. It is challenging to fix. This option 121 is blocked on Android, but nowhere else. It's only really used in a corporate environment. So every company, including Microsoft, should offer a way to turn it off. But Steve felt it wasn't a huge issue. It does mean, however, that VPNs are not the protection we thought they were on open Wi-Fi access points.
Yeah, no, as it turns out, what you should be using is incognito mode. So you'll be fine. You just use that. Everything's fine.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, if anybody's really interested in this, listen to Security Now from yesterday.
Yeah.
But he basically said, this has always been there. This is not a new thing.
Oh, boy.
It should not have been assigned a CVE. And it is a problem.
Oh. Okay.
But the operating systems have to fix it. And for some reason, only Android does it at this point. And I think Microsoft will be the last to because they are most used in enterprise. And this is where that option 121 is used.
It's going to break things. You know what? This is the time to do it, though. They're going to break things.
Hey, if you're going to break stuff, break it all.
Yep. Just break it.
Just break it. Anyway,
definitely Microsoft's had a love-hate relationship with VPNs. You know, they keep changing their minds on remote access and all of these other technologies. Like, I get to keep bringing Richard Hitz back to RunAs Radio to say, so what are they doing now? Because he's the expert to the point where the Microsoft people call him to say, what did we do last time? I
should talk to him about passkeys. I bet he could handle this in his brain.
I don't know that he would. He stays clear of authentication problems. He's going to deal with VPNs, remote connectivity.
Yep. Okay. I was just thinking, sometime in the past I had written someone had asked this question, so I looked up how to do this, and I had to write a tip about it. One of the issues with the sharing stuff I was mentioning earlier is that we don't really have the ways we used to have to share because the world has changed, right? So back in the day, we used to do network shares. There's all kinds of problems with that, and it's hard for normal people. Microsoft did home groups, remember, for a while. And you can still do, and people like us, people listening to the show would still want to do network shares, right? You can still do that. Super hard, unless if you're using a Microsoft account and, signing in like a normal human being, right? So there's kind of a matrix of functionality where things get really difficult. And tied to that is if you want to go use remote desktop to access one of your other computers. I had to do this for Hands on Windows. I didn't want to do the show from Windows 10, but I had a Windows 10 laptop. So I figured I'll just remote desktop into this thing, cue an afternoon of research and testing. And basically what it comes down to is the default configuration of Windows 10 and 11, which I sort of obliquely discussed earlier, requires you to use Windows Hello authentication with your Microsoft account. But you can actually disable that option. And if you do, remote desktop works. It's fun. So, there's all this stuff we've done over time for the right reasons, but it breaks these kind of legacy tools that, most people aren't using anyway. But, if you want to get something from, say, like my computer in here to a laptop out in the other room, I mean, just sharing a desktop or something like over the network, that works great. If you could figure it out, I'd love you. But you can do it. It's just, you have to really work for it. Okay. So, I've talked a lot about the enshirtification stuff in Windows. One of the things, and maybe people don't really think about this too much, but I've always tried to kind of document this or discuss it and with regard to what's actually in Windows, right? Like when I write a book like the Windows 11 Field Guide, which is ballooned to 1,100 pages, I don't want to be like, oh, you can solve this with a third-party utility, except now I do, because I'm getting tired of this and I can't, so I'm starting to look into third-party utilities, right, that fix problems. And there are no good solutions that actually work across the board for everything. But a couple I've run into this past week that I'm just going to throw out for now and say, you just know about these, maybe look at them. If you care about this stuff, take a look. Obviously, we've already talked about Tiny11 Builder, but since last week, it's been updated yet again. And now there's additional kind of edge removal functionality in that ISO that you create with that tool, which is great. there's a tool. It's I swear to God, the guy who wrote this tool learned WPF to do the UI, and the UI is a postage stamp size thing with like some text boxes on it. That's the whole UI. It's hilarious. But he does provide the source code. So if you want to look at it and see what it's doing, all it's doing is writing to the registry, which is important to know because a lot of these features that we can't stand are controlled by registry keys.
Yeah. That you have to edit manually.
Yeah. So it's called OFGB, which stands for Oh Frick, Go Back.
I love
and
it.
Basically, which is hilarious, right?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So it just like I said, it's just a list of options to disable File Explorer ads, disable lock screen ads, disable settings ads, it goes on. So you check them all off. You might have to restart. You might want to just run the thing every time you boot up, just because you might see that you install an update where it turns things off. Not bad. So I'm looking at that.
Again.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. The one I was more excited about, and I have to say, unfortunately, I've since been disappointed by, is something called WinToys. And WinToys is a much more exhaustive application for configuring things in Windows, most of which are, in fact, registry key based. The reason I was excited by this in particular was not just because it did so much, but because it also did stuff that wasn't Windows, like it did stuff for Office. And I was thinking, man, if this thing could turn off those little frickin' banner pop-ups that tell me to save to,
you could save that to
OneDrive, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, right? It doesn't work.
No,
I can confirm now it does not work. So
I actually did a registry key edit just like yesterday.
Yeah.
To turn off web search on my start menu because it was just hanging in the start menu and leaving it blank. And I knew rebooting the machine was the real fix for it, but you know what? Switching that reg key, boy, things are snappier. You stop searching Bing every time you click on the start menu.
Yeah. All right. So that is one of the things that's in WinToys. It's one of the probably 1,100 whatever options, but it is one of the things. And and it's the type of thing like what will happen is you'll get on with life. Months will go by. You'll click a link one day and Bing will open. You'll be like, "What? I turned that off." But because sometimes the updates will flip those switches, right?
Yeah.
So you almost need this thing that I don't know if you need something that runs in the background, but like I said, sometimes it helps just to because you can save your configuration in WinToys and you can just kind of run that and just maybe have it run on some schedule or something just to make sure you're
Collection of keys to apply.
Yeah, I'm not sure yet. I will probably discuss some of these on hands-on Windows at some point once I know how well.
And again, poking around in the registry is very hazardous. If you make mistakes, often you won't find it until the reboot, and then there's not much you can do about it. I remember being described as doing brain surgery on yourself.
Jeez. Actually, depending on where you are. Yeah. Someone in the Discord mentioned that Chris Titus has a very similar utility. Actually, has many utilities, but he does debloating stuff and whatever. But yeah, I haven't looked at that recently. That's on the list. I'm going to be looking at that too. So once I would love for one of these things just to solve the problems. Right now, not 100%, but I feel like we're starting to we're escalating it to the point where maybe Microsoft will start having to change the way they do things because we're starting to work around their terribleness. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a concern for sure.
We bring this up regularly just about this whole effect. And it's like, is it just the Windows team trying to show they're making new revenue by adding these different streams?
I think it really is. Yeah.
Like the fact that they're getting a piece of every single PC that ships isn't enough. They got to find other revenue streams, even if it does intoxify the whole product. Because I complain so much about what I see as problematic behavior, I do think we lose sight sometimes. I do respect Microsoft's desire to make more money per user, per month, per year, however you want to describe that. I mean, Apple's services business is based around this exact model, right? The issue is that there are kind of good ways and bad ways to do it. And my issue, frankly, is that I would pay them, Microsoft, to turn this stuff off, right? Right. But you just complained about having to pay for security. So like paying for stuff they put in to torment you and generate revenue.
Yeah, but this is like saying I've been chained to a dungeon wall for 2 years, and would you pay to go home? I'd say, yeah, I would. And we could quibble over whether, that's fair or not. But at this point, it's like, I just want it to end, Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know that we're ever going to get there. We used to have Chris Capicella for an end of the year show. I asked him about this point blank. Maybe the last time he was on, or the second last, one of those times. And, the way he described it was, if we ever did something like that, it would be like us admitting that what we were doing in Windows was wrong. And I honestly don't see it that way. I compare it to ad-free Outlook, right? You could pay
or YouTube
that bill, and I just don't see ads in Outlook, and that there's a benefit to that. And I respect that there's a model, a business model, like Spotify has, where there's an ad-supported version and a paid version, and that by offering both, you're making this product
at least
available.
Keep offering a choice.
That's right. I just want the choice. That's all. It really is just about the choice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I just threw this in here because I already had too many apps at the end of the show. But we've talked a lot about Arc Browser.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of questions when the 1.0 version came out for Windows 11 last week. The biggest one being, how come it's for Windows 11? Shouldn't it be for Windows 11 and Windows 10? So those guys have posted a video explaining what's going on with them, and it looks like they're going to iterate on this thing pretty quickly now. And Windows 10 is obviously in the plans and soon. And I think the most exciting bit about this is now that it's where it is, they're actually going to make the Mac and Windows versions identical, if you will, functionally. Nice. And that obviously involves adding features to Windows. It also, by the way, involves removing features from the Mac, not because they can't be implemented on Windows, but because they just have not proven to be popular or haven't made sense. And now that they've been tested out in the world, they know it's not going to work. They're actually going to start taking things away, and these things will become more aligned. So I wrote an article about that if you want to read that. They have a video if you go to their YouTube channel. So
awesome.
Interesting product.
Yeah. I still haven't spent enough time with it, but I mean, all my big workstations are Win 10. It's only the laptop that's Win 11.
Oh, so you can't. Yeah. So I would just say, look, as a power user tool, which it is, right? There's a learning curve, which I think is off-putting for a lot of people. The thing that I learned, because I had the thing I have trouble with is if you do like an Alt tab to go between the tabs in, Control tab rather, sorry. In every browser on earth, that goes through those tabs in order as they appear in your tab bar. In Arc, it goes through the most recent, I want to say it's 10, whatever the number is, but it goes 6, 10, whatever the number. It goes through them in the order you use them, and it doesn't go through all of them. And there is no setting where you can say turn on all of them.
Huh.
And the key to that is they have a different keyboard shortcut, which I believe is, I should know this off the top of my head, Control Alt, up arrow, down arrow, or left, I think it's up arrow, down arrow. It's one of the two. So it's a Control Alt, one of the arrow keys, and that is how you get through all of the tabs. So I still think there should be an option, just throwing it out there, checkbox, whatever, for this to work the way I want it to work. But I guess if you're a power user, if you are attracted,
there is an
to
option.
Product,
it's just a different shortcut key.
You need to maybe learning some keyboard shortcuts isn't too much to ask. That's all.
I'll you're going to be a power user. Be a power user.
Yeah. Don't pretend. So I pretended, I guess, for a while. I looked it up and I'm like, oh, look, there is a way. Yeah. So there you go.
All right. I see orange in my life.
Leo's listening to music.
I can tell. It's the jitterbug.
I'm trying to unfreeze my credit. Sorry. This is a freaking nightmare. These credit reporting companies are so horrific. So, well, they don't want you to freeze it, right? Yeah. But as we all know, you should all freeze it. The problem is they make it really impossible to unfreeze it now. I'm on Experian and the website's broken and the call center says you can't talk to a person. You go to the website.
But the website's broken.
But the website's broken. The only thing that happens is it says, would you like your credit report? No, I want to unfreeze. And I know they do this on purpose. The federal law requires them to provide free unfreezing and freezing, but they don't want to. So they intentionally screw this all up. That
makes it horrible.
It's just
this is what Apple's doing in the EU.
It's malicious compliance. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's the pause that refreshes. You're listening to Windows Weekly with Richard Campbell and Paul Thurrott. That was fun. Let's continue on. What does armed and ready mean? I really want to know. I'm dying to know.
So Apple yesterday had a big event. And by big, I mean 35 minutes. And we all knew exactly what they were going to announce. But They did, as rumored, announce their M4 chipsets.
Wow.
Less than 6 months after they announced the M3, which was less than 3 days after Qualcomm announced the Snapdragon.
It's a little less than a wow. I've been studying.
Yeah.
They even admitted that the GPU is identical to the M3.
Yeah. It's almost like this is really an M3
Plus.
dot something.
What it really is they
Right.
want to move to TSMC's new node, their new 3 nanometer NB node, as opposed to the NE node or whatever it was. And the M4 is on that new node. It's cheaper for them to make.
Right.
Well,
and they have a problem because they want to promote AI and all of this stuff.
That's right.
So it's my opinion, and I think I'm right on this, that we have seen the last of the M3. Apple is just going to skip M3 on everything from now on.
I think you might be right. But I sort of look at this as, to me, the most interesting thing was Apple usually does their own thing, right? This is the company that invents like a marketing term for their displays, and they're always different, And in this keynote, they said, look, we're going to start calling the, other companies call these things MPUs, they're MPUs. Right. Other companies call these things AI PCs, they're AI PCs.
Yeah.
They're adopting the language of the industry, I think, out of necessity, because this is a marketing thing.
They also
really
use the terms CPU and OLED, like they use convention terms too.
Yep.
I even thought they were making up tandem OLED, and it's not. It's actually
the other thing.
Standard OLED.
The other thing was the Qualcomm Elite chipsets. Again, we know that this top score is not the best way, and we will change someday in the future. But right now, the way we measure kind of hardware accelerated AI performance through an MPU is a top score, and Qualcomm is head and shoulders above everyone else. As it turns out, they were head and shoulders above the M3.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh wow.
The gap there was dramatic. Now, oddly, the M4 still does not match what
It's
Qualcomm
38.
is about to
They're
release.
claiming 38 tops. What is Qualcomm claiming?
Versus 50.
45.
I think it's 50, right? Or 55. Yeah, whatever the number
45?
is. It's
I thought it was
45. Sorry. Yeah, so it's still higher.
Yeah, interesting.
But now they're in the ballpark, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The current Intel and current AMD Gen stuff is also horrible. So, they'll catch up by the end.
And also, this is a tablet. This isn't even a laptop. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but this will hit. You're right. So in the fall, when we get new MacBook Pros, right, we will have M3 or M4, whatever they call it, Pro Max, whatever.
Right.
And those things, I bet, will have.
Yeah, I don't know.
MPUs
This almost reminds me of Intel's tick-tock strategy.
Yeah.
Right. Where the tick was you take the existing chip design and move it to the denser die set. And then the talk was now modify the design to take
talk was
advantage of
R2.
Right.
As we used to call it, the Windows
really
one.
taking advantage of it. So they're ticking over to a new fab
Process.
using the
manufacturing
same
process
chip
or whatever.
with
Yep.
some minor modifications. And then presumably by the fall, they'll talk.
And yes, that's
we'll
right.
see a fully
That's
optimized 4 with all
Yeah,
the
and
features.
I agree with that. And we'll see what actually happens. But I do expect MacBook Pros or whatever they release in the fall will have not this M4, but an elevated version.
The talked
whatever,
M4.
however they market it.
Yeah. M4
So I thought
talk.
that was
I
kind
like
of
that.
interesting. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So the Apple event was an Apple event, and it's like a bunch of the Apple marketing nonsense, blah blah. Only Apple would introduce a new iPad Air and then talk about an iPad Pro and say, "This is the lightest device we've ever made. It's as light as." And he paused for a moment. And I was like, "Air."
Nah.
And then he said whatever word he said. I'm like, unbelievable. Like seriously. But whatever. Apple, whatever. God love them. I mean, they're crazy. But
they feel like they're chasing a bit now. Like
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what's amazing
feeling
about
threatened.
this to me.
And they're suddenly upping the cadence. Like, why not just wait for the full M4 in the fall?
This is my point, because last October, when they announced the M3 early, which we didn't know how early you could announce something until yesterday. But at the time, we're like, oh, that's interesting. Qualcomm just came out with this blockbuster thing where they compared themselves to the M2. And you're like, hey, here's the M3. It's like, really? Like that's the timing?
Yeah.
This one's even more suspect, right? And so we'll see. At least from a TOPS perspective, the Qualcomm Snapdragon Elite chipsets,
But yeah, again,
are still ahead.
Jobs would have said we don't talk about it until we're beating everybody.
Yeah.
Cook,
you don't even mention it. Yeah.
Cook's really a hardware guy. Like, he's now trying to compete through hardware because that's what he understands.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
They're used to being so far out by themselves that now they're not. And holy man, it's interesting to see them chasing.
It's not even just like being so far out ahead. It's almost like they were separated from the market.
Yeah.
Like we
had a
don't
style.
We don't have to worry about what others are doing. We do our own thing, and it's like
it's better as you know.
Yeah, but by adopting the language of the industry pragmatically, I mean, and I think that was hard for them, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
they're asking to be measured, right? We are competitive.
That's right. We are. Apple is positioning itself alongside these other kinds, and now we can compare. So very interesting, I thought. Speaking of Qualcomm, not doing great, but they just really, like everyone else, Apple. I didn't talk about Apple's earnings, but there's no reason really to go there. But the Qualcomm earnings were flat, I would say, year over year from a revenue perspective. But the good news from them was they, as companies do, they always look at the current quarter or what they describe as the coming quarter, the quarter we're now living in, and they're like, this quarter is going to be great. And you like to see that from a company like Qualcomm. So I think flat earnings, and
they've also been a consistently conservative reporter too. That's true. The fact that they're this verbose
exuberant
about how good the next quarter is going to be, which it speaks to what are we going to see the Monday before build, right?
I haven't looked into this. I will say there is a little wrench though in this plan. We have this little problem with China right now, where we're preventing U.S. companies from doing business with Chinese companies. There are a couple of companies that have gotten exceptions to that, and two of them were Intel and, if I'm not mistaken, Qualcomm. And the government just cut that off. And so Intel, I haven't written about this yet, but they came out and warned that their current quarter, which already wasn't going to be super, is going to come in at the mid to low level of their predictions, not the upper end, because of that change.
And they're blaming this change,
And
where Qualcomm did the announcements before they knew the change was coming?
Yes. Yep. So it's possible that will impact Qualcomm as well. I need to look that up. I don't know if they've addressed it or if that's the case. I got to go look and see which companies were impacted by that.
Well, now it's about, on the other hand, make a really great laptop, but you've got a limited number of chips. That's going to drive the market wild. You just have to resolve it pretty quickly.
So one of the interests, obviously we know that Qualcomm, the biggest part of Qualcomm's business is they make chipsets for mobile devices, right? Not just the CPUs, but other chipsets, they do wireless chipsets.
Yeah, they do the radio stuff,
Apple products, et cetera. So they get to kind of compete in areas that other companies can't, right? So one of those areas is the smartphone market was up in the past quarter, but not for Samsung and Apple. Both of those companies saw shipments decline and revenue decline because in China, China-centric companies from China are going gangbusters right now. Well, Qualcomm sells chipsets to those guys, right? Not all of them. Huawei is one of the ones they can't sell to, but the other companies that are doing well, like Xiaomi and I forget the names of them, but these other companies that are doing well, Qualcomm sells them chipsets too. So in a time period where like Samsung and Apple are struggling to sell phones, relatively speaking, these guys are doing fine because it's these other companies that are still selling or growing, right? Growing double digits, right? So we'll see. We'll see if this impacts them. I think it might, but they haven't said.
And like I said, it's its own market. They're different companies.
Yeah.
So, and there's a ton of them too. Like, I wonder where OnePlus fits into all of this.
The other thing, right. And if you go back, so OnePlus is actually owned by one of the companies that is among the top 3 Chinese smartphone makers. And that company's name is Oppo, I think.
Oppo, yeah.
Yeah. So that's OnePlus. Yeah. So that's where you see those guys. And I think they're I want to say they're the second biggest right now in China.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing great. And those guys sell phones in Europe and Asia and elsewhere. It's not just China, but they're going gangbusters in China for sure. And then from AI, nothing super dramatic. Last week, remember we had that kind of blockbuster email revelation, which we're all dying to hear more about. This week it's not that dramatic, but Microsoft, the Microsoft 365, that part of the company, Jared Spataro, announced that
the giant cash cow. You mean?
Yeah, exactly. That they've gotten a lot of feedback that talking to AI, which I take to mean communicating with AI, meaning typing commands to AI, is difficult, right? Because we've been trained to be concise, right?
Yeah.
When we search Google, we search as little as we can type, right?
Mm-hmm.
We text message, we use emojis. We don't really, we're not verbose. And one of the I don't know, 5 or 6 top things I would say about AI, if you want to use this effectively, is the more detailed you can be, the better. You know.
Well, and the prefixing, right? It's like you watch a well-crafted prompt. There's a paragraph ahead of it that essentially defines the space you want to work in before you get to your intent.
I've often complained, and I will continue to complain about the language of AI because it's just so foreign and weird, and it's just unrelenting. And we talk about things like grounding.
Yep.
In this case,
the language they've built around this because it's very fun.
Prompt, like we call these things prompts. And unfortunately, they've come up with this term, which I really hate, which is called prompt engineering.
Oh, yes.
And
we're all prompt engineers.
Come on. This is like I need advice about how to talk to a girl. It's like, this is relationship engineering, or whatever. It's like, come on. Like, it's crazy. There was a conversation on Twitter where over the course of the back and forth with a couple of guys, this one guy was saying, this thing sucks. And this guy was like, this thing blows. And I was like, sucks, blows. The language of AI is the worst. We need better words to describe these things, But anyway, what he's referring to here is essentially not so much prompt engineering, but making it so that you don't have to do as much prompt engineering. So this will take the form of a help for the user, right? Autocomplete prompts is happening. Rewriting prompts for you. And actually, if you use Copilot, at least I'm sure ChatGPT does this too. You might see if you type in a prompt, create me a photo, and blah, 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 whatever it is. It will actually spit out the prompt it's using, which is a little different from what you wrote. Yeah. And I think the point of it there is you could be a little more precise.
Yeah, it's like a prompt preprocessor.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's well,
certainly on the enterprise side, we were talking about if you're using the enterprise versions, now we have sysadmins giving prefixes, preprocessed.
Oh God, that's what we need.
Well, based on business requirements, right?
No, I know.
These are the terms, but it's like, and these are stuff that's going to be stuck in your prompt, whether you like it or not. Like, that's what's happening.
It used to be stuck in your prompt. Now it's stuck in your prompt.
That's it.
What's wrong? It's like, you're at your doctor. You're like, I get something stuck in my prompt.
Yeah. My prompt prefixes are making me sad.
Yeah, right. So anyway, we're going to see help.
Prefix or preamble? It's a preamble, really.
Yeah. And dating back to the earliest time when we started talking about this stuff, which would have been around the time of the Bing Chat stuff, February 2023. One of my first sort of reactions was like, well, I'm sorry, we're going to type to this thing? That's how we're going to that seems like a weird step backward. But
yeah, because the problem with talking to it is the corrections.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's happy to do the first statement. And if it works perfectly, you feel good about it. And if it doesn't, you don't want to do it again.
Yeah. Over the course of the digital assistants, right? Google, the Alexa one, the Cortana when that was a thing, whatever, Siri.
For 15 minutes. Yeah.
Yep. we as those evolved, and this would have been better or worse with the ones that really evolved, like the Google and Amazon versions probably. But one of the big things they were working on before they kind of gave up on it in a way was conversations, right? This notion that we don't have to keep prompting it audibly, not a different kind of prompt, by saying, hey, whatever the keyword was.
Yep.
And it would remember context. So you could ask it follow-up questions, which is essentially what we're talking about here. And the idea is if this works fluently enough, and I guess fluidly enough, it becomes like a conversation where there's a back and forth. And it follows logically, and there's no pausing or, it just works, right? And I don't know, the success rate on that stuff with these assistants.
And this is where we get into the limitations of the software. It's like, it's not good at generalizing. So given a given set of a prompt chain where you've gotten a useful outcome, can it keep the things that are generalizable that will be part of a preamble for subsequent prompts, or and discriminate that from the specifics of this given conversation?
And tied to this, there's this whole notion of learning, right? It's another one of those terms, like kind of like, but of course these things do learn, right? And
no, they don't learn so much as they are trained.
Okay, yeah, okay, it's a push-pull thing, I guess. But yes, fair enough. But just to conceptualize it as a normal person, you can like, okay, there's some learning involved or whatever. But people don't think about this stuff explicitly, but in normal human interactions, there's a lot of assumptions that are made, either maybe the knowledge of the other person in some topic or in the way that when you can say things like, what I mean, And I think we're starting to see.
Now you're asking for common sense out of software. I love that.
Well, it's programmed common sense, but the idea is we're using a history of the things that you've asked for. We see the things that you've accepted and like and use. We've seen the ones that you ignore, and that can bias us. The AI that
you're asking for a discriminator again. And that's
we're teaching it to discriminate.
Yeah, no. And again, discriminate and generalize. Discriminate the general elements of this set of prompts, and that's hard. And it's something software fails at pretty reliably.
But this is like you can see the baby steps of it. It's interesting because I don't think we, as people, don't think about this stuff a lot. We're confronted now by this what seems like an alien intelligence. And it's like not. This. Yeah. I know. Again, I'm anthropomorphizing it or whatever. But it's a sub baby and it's learning. I know it's not, but we're teaching it. And I know. But I think it's helpful. I think in some ways to almost think of it that way. And I think
it's the opposite of helpful. You're casting intent on a piece of software.
No, I don't. I say that not being a fan of the language. But I look at the descriptions of what it is they're trying to accomplish with these improvements in this case.
How do we overcome the limitations of these language models?
There you go.
And, I think it's
but at some point I'm going to yell at Google or this thing and I'm going to say, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's going to say,
you should know better. There you go.
Here's a phone case we think you might want to buy. No, I'm not talking to Facebook.
Recommendation engines.
Yeah. Whatever the ad is, I'm sure this has come up a couple of times, but one of the things I definitely have been thinking a lot about is this notion of disruption and how companies like Google that are dominant today in one field, which is advertising, but is search, right? Are potential victims of disruption that could happen very quickly in a way that wasn't possible, say, with hardware and software companies like Microsoft, Intel back in the day.
Well, as long as you were going to try and race Google on their method and build a better robot, you were going to lose.
Yeah. And what it required was this thing that was different.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Let's aggregate all of the data you were aggregating with your robots into a learning model that it's essentially an I feel lucky button search. Right? Because all it's going to do is try and provide you with an answer very confidently, if inaccurately.
Right. But like a middle-aged white guy. So I think today we're at a point where most people who've tried either of these things will say, like, look, AI, whatever you use, is good at some things. And then Google search or whatever search is good at these other things, right? But the holy grail in a way is, can we combine these things into one thing? And of course, Google wants that to be Google search. And they'll put, and you'll see this with other search engines too. They'll do AI summaries at the top of the results. They're trying to get you to stay with.
Yeah. You've already got what you want.
So one of the things about OpenAI and ChatGPT is like, well, what if these guys make like a search engine, right? Like what if ChatGPT or something based on ChatGPT becomes essentially like a replacement for Google search, even if it's not exactly the same thing? What if this would be better for that purpose, for that general use case? The thing that today Google is paying, I think last year was it $18 billion just to the Apple for just the iPhone,
right? To
be the default search engine. This is a really valuable market, right?
Yeah.
And they're working on it, according to a report in Bloomberg.
So. And the problem with this kind of aggregation is not allow for dynamic ad insertion.
Yes, right.
Like you are undermining the entire business of search going down this path. And hey, I'm all over that. Like, give me more complete undermining of an ancient predatory model.
It's something has to give in a sense, right? Yeah. In other words, there will be right now it's a paid model in a way. There's a free model and there's a paid model. Microsoft does put ads in the free version of Copilot. So you could make an argument that maybe there will still be ads. Because it's not the only way to monetize this, it maybe won't get as aggressive as Google has gotten, or Facebook, or any of these other ad-based companies. We'll see.
Well, nobody gets aggressive until you miss your quarterlies.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Once the growth stops and you need to keep. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see, that's what I meant by we'll see. We'll see how that actually plays out. But I like we talked about this earlier. I like the choice. You could pay for this thing. It's better. Or people can't pay this ad supported. And that works pretty well. I mean, honestly, the free version of Copilot's pretty great. Like it's it's depending on your needs, like paying for that might not make a ton of sense. So OpenAI going after Google search is the nightmare scenario for Google. And look, there's been a lot of turmoil with OpenAI, a lot of PR in the past year or so, but they're still kind of the golden child here, aren't they? I mean, they still have this. Every time anyone comes up with an LLM of any kind, they have to compare it to OpenAI. That's what you want. They're the Kleenex.
They're the ones who accidentally kicked off the storm.
Right. Gemini's pretty good. I've been playing with Google's Gemini in the last week, and it's actually gotten much better. So I like Gemini pretty well. I think they're all close.
Part of the. I think so too. Yeah.
All of them.
They're all essentially
right is about
using the same algorithms.
All the hubbub right now is about this code named GPT-2, which is a funny code name.
Yeah, the secret little thing that's been secreting around the internet, showing up. And
some people say it is the preliminary version of ChatGPT-5, which of course we know OpenAI is working on. I did see somebody, it's only in, you can only try it in they have arenas where you try one AI against another, and it's in one of the arenas. And I did see a guy.
He actually got it.
Yeah. Well, no, running in the arena, running a ChatGPT-2 to create code, and it did quite a good job. But, whenever that happens, you get runnable, like it worked. He asked it to write Flappy Bird, and all he did was give it images. And it produced Flappy Bird, but I have to think it has a copy of Flappy Bird in its
model. Or at least a more detailed explanation of what the game is and what the mechanics are.
It was pretty amazing. I mean, it came really close.
I did not read this yet, but I say that there's a story about how teaching software engineering is changing because the semantics of a given language, which used to be a big focus of individual courses, maybe is not as important anymore because AI can actually handle a lot of that.
That's right.
And that's a good point, So anyway.
Why ChatGPT-2 is your go-to for quick Flappy Bird game creation.
That's great. I love it.
You want to see the video, though? It's kind of amazing. I mean, it actually is on Pinterest, or as you say, Pinterest. Yeah. I mean, that's Flappy Bird.
And unlike the loser that made that game, AI's not going to take it away. Was that the right game?
Yeah.
Was that Flappy Bird?
Yeah. It was a South Vietnamese guy who it was too popular, and he said, "I'm getting nervous here.
Right. I couldn't handle it.
I can't take it, man.
Those checks, it must have been awful getting all that money.
Can't take it anymore.
I'd love to have this problem. Sorry, Leo, I'm making too much money. I'm stressed.
Yeah, it's stressing me.
Complete opposite of the reason most people are stressed over.
So
money.
he had Python. He did it in Python. He had it installed, of course.
Yeah.
He said, access the I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot at the LM-Sys arena. Provide the chatbot with one prompt, code Flappy Bird game in Python. It sent it the script. He had to provide the background and bird and pipe images.
Mm-hmm.
Did it in Pygame.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, how could it be an IP violation?
Yeah, right.
God, I mean, just tweak it a bit, dude.
Yeah, give it a different image.
I mean, here's
please.
the next question: was Flappy Bird already in the public domain? Was there already source code there?
Well, a lot of people after Flappy Bird.
Well, there's been a lot of clones.
There's a lot of clones. Yeah, the code is out there.
Yeah,
I think the real test
question
would be,
did it write anything or did it search it out? And
the question really would be, could you write something that's not been written before? More than can you write something that has been written before?
I mean, Shakespeare was basically screen scraping. I think we can all agree.
Write Shakespeare's unpublished play.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, it's going to be a ton of those.
Yeah.
Exit stage left, pursued by bear.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Yeah. I'm a little chatbot, short and stout. Anywho, so Microsoft, which is to my mind has spent the past 4 months at least, maybe longer, almost trying to distance itself from OpenAI, even as it really relies on it, right? Mm-hmm. Is now rumored. This is a report in the information, so I didn't read the original copy. This is a expensive paywalled publication, but very good sources, and they're often correct. Is apparently working on an AI model of their own, led by, wait for it, Mustafa Suleyman character who came to them recently from out of the blue. and is supposed to be on par with, or will soon be on par, I should say, with ChatGPT-4 as far as, the number of parameters, accuracy, speed, et cetera. So we'll see. But this is an in-house effort. This is not rely on OpenAI in any way. It's, it's happening in-house. And I think this is, I'm sure for people inside Microsoft, the OpenAI stuff, this was a concern when this guy came in from the outside. They started this Microsoft AI organization. We could do this, right? Why, we have the expertise to do this. Why aren't we doing this? So it seems like they're at least trying, as well. So we'll see what comes of it, but interesting. They haven't announced it, right? There's nothing official yet, but it does look like Microsoft might be, trying to out OpenAI.
Yeah. Do you see it as a hedge?
Yeah. Or, what, we talked about how Apple might, everyone makes this up, but this notion of this bespoke AI where you can choose which ones you want, or maybe they use specific ones for specific tasks. I could imagine Microsoft is offering its customers a variety of options through Azure, right?
Yeah. We'll offer you 5 options and 3 of them we own. Excellent.
And OpenAI might always sell or will sell for some amount of time just because of the name that they have and the reputation and so forth. But Microsoft might be able to say, ours is 85% is good and 50% is expensive, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I do. I think it is a hedge for sure, because there's always that fear, like someday they're gonna get up and be like, yeah, I think we're done with you. See you later, and walk away. So they need to have something in house. I mean, obviously, they can continue using what they have from OpenAI, but I think maybe that's what Microsoft AI was all about, really, right? Was getting that in house and also preventing him from doing that somewhere else.
Yeah, no. So it's something about locking a company up, right? And at least, plus, the lucky timing for them. They, we've told this story already about just being in early when things weren't great because they wanted the Azure workloads, and in some ways, kind of locked it up because where else are you going to run it? Much less, how are you going to pay for it? We own the means of production here.
Yep. Yeah. AI, their cloud infrastructure is like the blood diamond of the technology world.
Effectively. That certainly is a controlling factor, and how you price it accordingly, right? I think one of the things that held Amazon back is they're so much in the third party model. They want people to pay to experiment with this stuff to get it to a useful state. And so it's just too expensive. You're talking billions. And people didn't do it.
Yeah.
And now they're chasing from behind.
AI for Microsoft is a bit like Surface in that they're kind of providing the underpinnings to developers and third parties through Azure, but they're also coming out with their own first party services too, right?
Well, I mean,
kind of double dipping,
Totally. And at the same time, implementing it throughout their products, some more visibly than others. Certainly using it internally to optimize their own workloads.
Right.
So,
and we can look forward to the future antitrust case where they're forced to create an open model for AI plugins in Microsoft 365, and you'll be able to choose through a AI ballot of some kind where it's OpenAI, Gemini, whatever, Anthropic, whatever, and this
roll the dice.
The cycle repeats.
As long as there's an option that says "I feel lucky" on it too.
Yep, with a little TM next to it, because I think Google might own that. But yes.
I'm not going to torment you about Xbox today.
What's that?
I'm not tormenting you about Xbox today.
There's only 4 stories. How long could it go?
I'm not going to bring Blizzard up at all. I mean, why would I bring that up?
I'm glad to hear that, because unfortunately, Microsoft announced this week that they're shutting down 4 Bethesda studios.
Okay, so no,
including
Activision Studios, just Bethesda Studios.
Bethesda's part of the acquisition, right?
No, Bethesda was
different
previous.
Earlier.
ZeniMax.
Okay.
Yeah. But what was that company's actual name was?
ZeniMax.
Richard said it.
ZeniMax. You're right. ZeniMax. Yep. I think you said ZeniMax.
ZeniMax. Yeah.
No, different thing.
Late at night with ZeniMax. ZeniMax. So Bethesda, was Castle Wolfenstein. They own id Software.
id.
That stuff. So. But
and Fallout,
one of the
right? It's the big one.
But they're not shutting that stuff down.
No,
of course not.
No. But one of their big goofs this past year was that game Redfall, right? This kind of vampire
kind of didn't land well.
Where that studio is closing.
Good.
Yep. Hi-Fi Rush, which if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that one of the 4? Was that not one of the 4 games they brought cross-platform? I guess not. The developer behind that Tango Gameworks, Alpha Dog Studios, Roundhouse Games, not to be confused with Roadhouse Games. And this is, obviously this is bad news. I'm not making light of this at all. However, it seems like we've had a bunch of this lately. And I can tell you that my audience, which is kind of Xbox fanboy heavy, not happy with what's happening. There's a lot of concern what this means. I on one level, I would just say, look, they spent $1 kajillion acquiring Activision Blizzard. There's going to be a bunch of overlap. There's a reassessment of the assets and what makes sense to continue forward with and what not to. And I can say that, but the problem is it's months later and it seems like it keeps happening.
Yeah, and they're not don't seem to be making anything. Like, where are the releases? Although not a lot of time. Arguably, if one of these studios released a game right now, I mean, maybe in the Bethesda side, if they're releasing a game, you could say, okay, that's Microsoft influence. But nothing coming out of Activision would be. It hasn't been long enough.
I know.
This is a year, tough. 18 months.
So that's unfortunate. Starfield, we remember that game, that 30 frame per second wonder on the Xbox Series X when it was released late last year, is getting a big update. And among the changes is it will finally achieve the level of quality we were kind of expecting, frankly, which means it will run it up to 60 frames per second on an Xbox Series X. There's some display settings stuff coming that's sort of similar to what you would see on a PC, depending on the quality and the capabilities of the monitor you're connecting to, et cetera, et cetera. So you could just say, look, I just want it on 60 frames, everything else be dimmed, and there might be some screen tearing. If you have a high frame rate monitor, sometimes it will actually uncap and go above 60, but sometimes it might drop as low to 30, et cetera. There are visual and performance modes coming.
This is Xbox stuff. So this is known hardware.
Yep, I know, but I this was the big problem. Like this game, which took forever to come to market, came to market in what most people would say was kind of unfinished and unfair form on their marquee or their flagship console. Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, they are course correcting on that. Nintendo announced their fiscal year ended at some random, well, maybe it was March 30th. It was sometimes these companies, it's like the end of our fiscal year was March 24th. Like, what? But whatever their date, whatever their date was, it doesn't matter. They have now sold cumulatively over 140 million Switch consoles. This is obviously slowing down pretty dramatically, but they sold almost 60 million in the past fiscal year, which is great.
For any other console maker, that would be great.
Even for Nintendo, it's pretty great. Like it not counting the DS, I think it is. This is their best-selling device of all time.
They define the genre.
Yep, unbelievable. And an interesting perspective because, what was that? The Nintendo Wii was like this as well. Like, you don't have to have next-gen graphics. You don't have to have the most powerful hardware.
Yep.
Game quality matters, right? There's an audience for this stuff.
Well, and they have a set of titles that are uniquely theirs.
They're also a weird company in so many ways. But one of the ways that exhibited itself over the past 12 months was that April, a year ago, a Super Mario Brothers movie came out, which I assume everyone watching and listening to this either only vaguely knows about and completely dismissed. This was like the biggest thing in the world for this company. And one of the reasons that this past year was way better than it should have been was it drove demand of Mario games. So like a bunch of games that have been around for a while started selling again. And it actually kind of drove the Nintendo Switch forward. As part of their earnings announcement, not during it, but kind of parallel to it, the president of Nintendo announced what we all knew, which is that the successor to the Switch will be announced sometime in the next 12 months, right? Probably by the holiday, I would think, honestly. So that's coming. Switch 2, we're thinking probably 1080p. Yeah, guess we're moving up to that level announcement,
like not release.
Nope.
So you might as well leave it as late as possible to make it release for next Christmas.
It could be. Although the year thing sort of indicated, that's a good point, actually. Right. Well, we'll see. I would be surprised if they went into the holiday without something, but they're going to have.
That's really mean. You don't promise Switch 2s you can't deliver for Christmas. You don't even give people the option to promise a Switch.
That's right. Well, so past Xbox announcements, initial announcements have been in the first half of the year. Like I think Xbox, it might have been Xbox One was in April, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
They are having a June event, and one of the things this guy mentioned was we're not announcing it there. So yeah, that could be that. You could be.
Yeah, it might be January 24 for the shipping.
Yeah,
Christmas 24,
that could be.
Or 25. Yeah, January 25 for Christmas 25 would be feasible.
But they expect Switch shipments to fall again during the current fiscal year, as you would expect. But if they land where they think they're going to land, this console by a year from now will be their best-selling hardware device of all time.
Yeah, it's just a question of the main customer is the person who already has a Switch.
Yeah,
they need a new one.
I've never bought a Switch. I don't know why. I've always been kind of intrigued by it. Yeah.
And you're not alone, Leo. Most people I know have a Switch have more than one.
Yeah.
My son is a Call of Duty veteran. He's better at this game than any human being I'm aware of. And my daughter is not a gamer. And they were home over the holidays, and we saw them in February as well. But it was over the holidays when I noticed this. They're home, but they're not anywhere. Like they're not out in the house. They're somewhere else. And so, like, where are the kids? And they're sitting in a room. They're not playing together, but they're both on a Nintendo Switch playing games.
Yeah.
And I was like, you want a Switch? What's happening here? But they both on a Switch.
The older daughter and her friends, who are all in their 30s, still play Animal Crossing on the Switch.
I think that's plays
incredible.
it. It's not kids.
Yeah, it's not kids. And I did not buy them any of those machines. Like they did that themselves.
They can afford their own.
That's right.
Yeah,
and they prioritize that.
Right. Same with my kids. Yeah, exactly.
Older
they can't afford their car insurance, but apparently they can afford their Nintendo Switch.
I'll buy the new Switch in a heartbeat. It's a great little device.
Yeah, I don't know why I haven't. I wish Microsoft would come out with a portable Xbox. I would be very happy with that.
No, I got to confine my game playing more than that.
You weren't tempted by the Steam Deck, either of you?
No, and I've got a buddy who worked on it, but
I thought about it, right? I mean, as you do.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm not putting another thing in my laptop bag. That's enough.
I played with it and was unimpressed. I really like a big
But
screen.
I think that's the beauty of the Switch is it's not that, it's basically a tablet weight and size. It's not, you wouldn't probably notice it too much. I mean, I carry 2 laptops a lot. I mean, I just never did it.
You're not normal, Paul.
I thought we've established that.
I think we covered that. Yeah, we've covered it pretty clearly.
It's come up a bunch of times today.
You're not normal. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, embrace it. And then what was it? Diablo.
In self-inflicted wound history.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the big issues
this thing, Helldivers.
Game publishers are going cross-platform, right? So Sony's making games for the PC. Microsoft is making games for other consoles. Microsoft came out with their first Activision Blizzard title on Game Pass, and it requires, like a battle.net, membership or whatever the heck it's called, which it was confusing for a lot of people. Sony, PlayStation, was coming out with one of their titles, Helldivers 2, or is coming out with Helldivers 2 for the PC. And they were going to sell through Steam, and they wanted you to link to a PlayStation account, which a lot of those gamers do not have. Right? So
don't want
push back.
Or can't get if they're in a variety of countries, many countries.
Yeah, there you go. So they're going to not do that, right? So they've just stepped back from that cliff and said, you know what?
Took them a little while to get to that point. They sort of hummed and hawed about it.
Did you see the 500,000 negative reviews on Steam? Yeah. That, I think, was what did it.
I mean, that will do it.
Oh, man.
That will do it.
Yeah. So you set a record.
Sometimes it takes a push for you to do the right thing. And in this case, it did. And then he did. I guess finally.
By all accounts, a pretty cool game. Just dumb to impair it with these kinds of requirements.
I mean, this kind of stuff turns people off. In the Microsoft world, just a Microsoft account is something that's completely uninteresting to a lot of people.
Yeah, you're either in the world and you already have one, or you don't want one.
I don't want another online account.
Yeah,
it's like
I don't want one.
I mean, fair enough.
Yeah.
One thing you don't see when you sign into Windows is like a couple of logos under the login box. It's like a Google logo, an Apple logo. Like you don't see that.
Not so much, no.
This is interesting because it was mostly negative when we looked at this on Sunday. It is now mostly positive. People responded very well to Sony's decision not to do this because it was at one time the game of the year. I mean, people really loved it. But
so this was, I assume this was a PS 5 game, and they brought it to the PC. Is that how this worked?
Yeah. See, it's interesting that democracy has prevailed. We have won. The Helldivers have secured.
Rules, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
fair enough.
It's so funny how that changed. They required a PSN
I wonder if there was
account.
some fiddling of the data too.
Well, this is something I've said of Microsoft. I mean, if you want them to change, complain.
Loudly.
They make a lot of mistakes, but they actually do listen to that kind of feedback. And if there's enough of it,
and their leadership is a big believer in customer feedback.
Yeah,
it helps.
Yeah,
I think Sony had never seen anything quite like this.
I think this was exactly.
Away.
I think this was just confusing to them. But it's like, welcome to the PC world, guys. You know, you have to make us
it made
concessions.
it, frankly, for many users outside the countries where you could have a PSN account. This made it unplayable.
Yeah, they were going to break the game.
And
the bigger thing here is, and I think this was the genius of the game maker, who was a contractor on this, was that he got them to ship it without that requirement,
right?
So that it was in all these places where now you have to pay them, you have to refund them
exactly
if you're going to do this.
Yeah, it's a kind of beloved independent game studio that Sony published,
right?
And I wonder if they did it intentionally, like they knew if I get it out there without it,
smart. Smart,
very clever.
Smart. Well, the democracy has prevailed. Thank you very much.
In a form, I think more mob rule has prevailed, but
isn't it anarchy?
We call democracy when it's the mob we like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Democracy is the mob we like. I love it. That's good.
Hey, I want to invite you, before we get to the back of the book, I want to invite all of you to join a mob. It's a pretty good mob. It's called the Club Twit Mob. A bunch of people who are smart, interesting, and have the very good sense to have joined Club Twit. And it's more than just supporting what we do, or getting ad-free versions of all the shows, or getting video of Paul's hands on Windows when you only hear the audio in public and stuff like that. It's really about joining a community, and it does make a big difference to our bottom line. We are getting close now to being able to cover our payroll, minus Lisa and me, but to cover all the other people with Club Twit memberships. That makes a really big difference in our long-term future, because ad dollars are soft. Lisa just told me our Q3 prospects, and we are, I think, $600,000 underwater. Yeah, I mean, she's going to sell it. Q3 doesn't start for a couple months. We got a little time. She's at RSA right now, pounding the floor, but the club really is the way to do it, I think. I would really prefer it. So if you're not a member of the club, it's just to fill you in, it's $7 a month. You get all those benefits, and you get to hang out in the Discord with some really cool people. I think both Paul and Richard will agree. I mean, you guys are in there right now. It is really fun, smart, interesting people. So if you're not a member, can I invite you to visit twit.tv/clubtwit. They're individual memberships, $7 a month. There's also corporate and family memberships. We discontinued the, at my request, Lisa's quick to say, at my request, discontinued the year plan because I didn't want to be bound to doing this for a whole year. And I didn't want to do refunds either. I think it's the refund thing is really the issue. Well, if we ran out of money and couldn't keep doing it would be a problem. Yeah, smoothing out the revenues makes a lot of sense. So I think we have to go, at least for the time being, until things really start to solidify. Twit.tv/clubtwit. It is a great group of people. I really have come to like them. I spend a lot of time in the Discord, and I know you guys are in there during the shows. Please give it a thought. Give it a. I would show it, but it's on the wrong screen right now. But it's good. They're having fun in there. Twit.tv/clubtwit. All right. Let's see. Back of the book time. And that means it's time for Paul's tip of the week.
So let's see. It's the week of May 20th is Build in Seattle. Richard and I are going. Mary Jo's going. We have schedules and things that are happening, but we're not now 100% sure. Mary Jo and I were talking about doing what we used to call the Build Blogger Bash. Which is just a meetup at a bar, restaurant, whatever. The last one we had, which would have been, I guess, 2019, was at the Pine Box, which is, if I'm not mistaken, just north of the convention center, but regardless of where it is, where she's doing this work. I'm saying we, like I have something to do with this, but she's actually doing the hard work. She always does she's good at this kind of stuff, but she's looking at that. So I don't have an exact day or place yet, but it will probably be, well, it would be the night of the 20th, the 21st, or the 22nd. We're shooting for the 21st, which is the Tuesday. We don't know where. So I will obviously talk about that on the show. I'll tweet about it. It'll be on my site, etc. But sometime between now and then, we're less than 2 weeks away. We'll have a meetup somewhere. So if you're in Seattle or going to Seattle or going to be going to Build or whatever it is, just kind of, pencil it in. We'll figure something out, whatever night that might be.
That's so good. I'm so glad to hear that.
It's been a long time. It's been forever since we've done something of this scale. I mean, when we did the TWiT cruise back in was that almost 2 years ago? No, July.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We met a small group of people at a bar and stuff. That was fun. But like this could potentially be lots.
Well, what was missing during the cruise is Mary Jo. We had Richard and Paul, but really the person who drives the
I asked Raphael to dress up in a wig, and he just, I don't know, it was weird. He got weird.
I think people would line up to see Mary Jo. So
yeah, and she's good at organizing these things too. So that's good.
Well,
and then just a couple of appy type things, not like apps like you get in a restaurant. You know what I mean? So,
that's the most confusing thing. I never called appetizers apps.
Right.
And now,
so this is a language that my kids' generations have created.
Is that what it is?
I hate it. My kids and my sister's kids, when they were still in high school, there were two things they would do. They would hang out in the parking lot of the Wawa, which is kind of a Pennsylvania specific thing, but they would also go to half price apps at Applebee's.
Yeah, Applebee's.
And I think that's why they call them apps, because it was Applebee's.
Yeah, I blame Applebee's. Yeah.
And screw those guys. But you know what? Whatever. They were saving money. God bless them. I'm not talking about those kind of apps. I'm talking about the real kind of apps. So Stardock, makers of Start11, window blinds, etc., has a suite of apps called Object Desktop, which is a yearly subscription that bundles a bunch of their best applications together. They've added a new one in beta this week called Desktop GPT, which is what it sounds like. It's kind of a, what do you call the Mac feature, Spotlight, or what is Spotlight search type of thing. You do I think it's Control Alt F, thing comes up, you type in prompts, right? You can talk to Chat GPT. And the thing that I guess sets this apart a little bit from, like Copilot or whatever, is that they have, Brad especially, but they at Stardock, Brad Sam's my friend and former coworker who works at Stardock, have been using this tool internally for a long time. And they've created templates that allow you to do certain things kind of easily and quickly. And you can write your own templates and so forth. But it does all the stuff you want, like content and other types of, or writing and other forms of content creation, proofreading, summarizing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a standalone product. It's, at least now it isn't. It's part of Object Desktop. So if you have that, you can just get it for free. It's there.
Nice.
And then I mentioned this in passing. Proton's a company I'm very interested in, super secure, super private focus, et cetera. They have a password manager called Proton Pass. There are free and paid tiers to that. And they've added kind of a suite of online account protection services, some of which are available in the free account, some of which require a subscription. But this is the stuff we were talking about earlier where, you'll see this in certain password managers like dark web monitoring to see if your stuff has popped up on the dark web. They have email aliases, custom emails, and then that password health checkup thing, which I think everyone pretty much does. Weak and reused passwords is probably the big part of that. And then the thing I talked about, which I think is pretty cool, I do think some other password managers have this. I'm not sure if Dashlane does or not, but this is where you have accounts that could be configured with 2FA but aren't, and it will pop up and say, "Hey, you've got 7 accounts. Let's go configure them for 2FA." To be as secure as possible. I think that's a fantastic
That's a great idea.
So, so I think it's, is it just proton.com? Probably. Proton.me is the website. And then proton.me/pass if you're looking at this particular service. But they have a bunch of, Proton Mail, Proton Calendar. They have a bunch of apps and services. So definitely a company to keep in mind if you care about this kind of stuff. So interesting.
Excellent. Now it's time for RunAs Radio with Mr. Richard Campbell.
So I've made enough noise about Microsoft Entra the past year or so that the Entra folks reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we help you?" Which I appreciate, actually, because they, you are talking to the folks who are literally making the product. And so this week's show is one of those where I got Jeff Casimir on the show, who's a principal product manager for Entra. And we got a chance to talk really about the broader spectrum of thinking about identity from an administrator's perspective. So when we say identity governance, we're really talking about the full life cycle of an identity. We all have, when you're working in IT, the onboarding script. A new person comes in and they get an email account and they have a role in the organization, so they get a certain number of privileges and so forth. And there's an offboarding process too when they leave. And in between those two, there's a whole bunch of other steps. If they get a promotion and move to another team, they need new privileges. But then when the old ones get cleaned up, and so we talked about automation around a bunch of that stuff. And, really the mantra that we often run into as a sysadmin is, how do I get this out of my support tickets? Right? Like, I prefer that HR is able to effectively kick off that provisioning process by bringing someone in. So we've got hooks in there to create this stuff automatically. And a lot of this should be automatic. And that gets really interesting when you start thinking about the evolution of someone's employment. Switching from one role to another side of a company is not an instantaneous thing. They may still have responsibilities in the old role for some period of time, and that has to keep rights in place. And then they later need to be removed, or you end up with, kind of propagating rights. The longer you've been in there, the longer you work for the company, the weirder things get. And so it ended up being a really great conversation about the tooling that's going on with the Entra team, really tackling these problems that Microsoft has with their long-lived identities, both in Azure and outside. And so a lot of conversations around things like entitlement management and access portaling and how we apply it to sysadmin. So I was very happy with the conversation, and it is a harbinger of a series of shows I think I'm going to be able to do with the Entra team to get deeper into this problem space for administrators.
Excellent. RunAsRadio.com. Well, that leaves us with but one small detail.
We've all been waiting.
Yes.
And I'm going to British Columbia. Well, I'm already here.
I was going to say, it's not a big trip.
Not a big trip, no. And looking out my view and a little bit further north, I'd be able to see the home of this particular whiskey. This is Shelter Point. And Shelter Point is a chunk of coastland on Vancouver Island, east side, just south of Campbell River. And it's been a distillery only since about 2011. The fellow who started it, his name is Patrick Evans, and his multi-generational family on the island, an area called the Comox Valley, where they've been farmers. And so he was able to acquire land. It was already a farm, but it was one of the university experimental farms, about 300 hectares, pretty big for that kind of property along the coastline around Shelter Point. And so he got that in 2005, started growing barley along with a bunch of other crops. Very much an organic process, and decided that one of the things he could do with barley was make whiskey from it. And so recruited a buddy of his, a guy named James Marinus, who was also in farming, to lead a distillery. And they got some funding. They brought in Andrew Curry. Andrew Curry's father, Hal Curry, was the man who brought whiskey back to Arran, the Islay type island. That had last had a distillery on it like the 1800s. And in the 1990s, he brought a new distillery to Arran called the Arran Distillery. And so this is his son, and his son has been running Arran Distillery and some others. And so was part of sort of getting things up and rolling with them, including recruiting a fellow by the name of Mike Nicholson, who's a very famous master distiller, spanning 18 different distilleries, including Lagavulin, over his career, and had happened to retire to Vancouver Island. So they dragged him out of retirement, acquired a couple of pot stills from Forsyth, Scotland, the proper, low wines, high stills. They obviously grow their own barley, do their own malting. They're only the second Canadian single malt distillery in all of Canada, going back in 2011. There's more now. The first being in Nova Scotia, a place called Glenora, that had all kinds of interesting conflicts when they first started getting going, because they were using the term single malt. The Scots were pretty adamant about, no, that's us. And it's like, hey, I'm not calling it Scotch. I'm calling it Canadian whiskey, but using the single malt process. This is a very small operation. They make about 65,000 bottles a year, but they do sell into the US. So the particular edition I picked up, they have a few, is their cast strength single malt. So local barley, local water, no special treatments to this. Now, because it's a cast strength, what does that tell us? Has it ever had water added to it? Absolutely. The water was added to it when it came out of the still and was cut down to probably 63.5 before they put it into bourbon casks. It was aged for a certain amount of time. There's no appellation on this bottle, which tells us it's a low number, over 3 years, so they wouldn't call it whiskey. Not that they have to comply with those rules, because this is Canada, not Scotland, but you're pretty sure they do.
This is Canada.
Yeah, and they don't. There's no Scots hovering over them.
Canada.
And of course, right on the seaside, like one of the things about Shelter Point is very Scottish terrain. The salt in the air, cool breezes, cold winters. This is like Scotland, a great place to age a whiskey. And so here we go with, a color that without any additional coloring or chill filtration, which they've done neither to. Is probably
impressive. Yeah.
And probably a 6 year, something like that.
Yeah. Looks good.
Got a fruity nose on it. Definitely, it is a cast strength, so it's going to poke you.
That's going to poke you.
It's going to poke you. Yeah. Now, I've never done this on the show before, but when you're drinking a cast strength, one of the things you can do is add a little water to it. Right. And so before the show started, I got a glass of water together with a teaspoon. I like to let the water sit. I'm just using tap water, nothing fancy here, but I let the water sit because we chlorinate our water here up on the coast. It's lake water, so it's very soft, but I want the chlorine to be gone. So let the water sit for an hour or so. It's all gone. And I'm just going to take a teaspoon of this water and I'm just going to put a couple of drops in. There we go. And right away I could see, and it's probably not going to come across in the camera, but I could see where the water hit because there's little threads that come off the water as the congeners interact with the water. So you really are changing the chemistry of this by adding a little water to it.
You don't need to much. You're not diluting it so much as just
well, and what are we talking about? A couple of ounces there, an ounce and a half or so. I pour pretty heavy. So a few splashes is going to take it down a few points. It definitely took the harsh note off.
Yeah.
And I would say that's less to do with the alcohol and more to do with the breaking of some of the congeners. So we changed the chemistry in this.
Interesting. It's a chemistry experiment in a glass.
It absolutely is. And now I could add a little more. And now I'm trying to get more into the 40% range. So down to a regular spirit flavor. I don't want to go too far with that. And I've actually had some whiskeys where when I added water to it, they didn't get better. They got worse. So it's something to experiment with cast strengths, is giving them a few drops and then maybe giving a few more to see where you got to. But this is very warming. It's sort of a lighter. There's no peat in here at all. It's woody. It's got some wood strength to it. I want to finish out the story about Shelter Point with the fact that in 2022, Patrick Evans sold the majority of his stake in that distillery to an investment company, to Nelson Investments, which normally would make me sad. Right. But he wanted to focus on the farming side of things. So he still has a relationship with them. But then I went and investigated Nelson Investments because it's not Diageo, like it's nobody I'd heard of. And it turns out they're a local Vancouver Island investment group. They're literally a couple plus another couple who are directly related. It's Chris and Stephanie Nelson, and Stephanie's brother, Jason Gordon, and his wife, Jeannie. That's Nelson Investments. Born and raised on the island, although apparently Stephanie is from Prince Rupert, which is a little coastal town, central coast BC. And they have I think they were originally just a property portfolio investment company. They had a bunch of properties in Vancouver, but then they started investing on the island. And so they have a resort in Tofino, which is on the West Coast, and they have a solar lighting company. And then they got into spirits marketing. They created a company called Beverage. Something they formed in 21, and in 22, they bought a majority stake in Shelter Point. So I really don't I'm not sad. Like, that's kind of cool that a local investment group has increased the funding and sort of created the Kretsu effect by having that marketing company and things to take Shelter Point further. And that's one of the reasons I was happy to see they sell in the US, because often these small distilleries in other countries just don't get outside of the country. It's not a thing. And so part of this, I think, is by having marketing company and some professional services around it, that they have been able to get into the U.S. market. So we can all give it a try. That cast strength edition that I just was talking about 70 US, which is pricey. That's up there. That's a nice bourbon, better quality bourbon, or a mid 10-year-old Scottish whiskey will come in around that. So it's not a cheap whiskey by any stretch of the imagination, but you're buying a little BC there. You are the body of water that I'm looking at. Straight across from there is where Shelter Point would be. So not far from me.
Little BC in a bottle.
That's it.
BC in a bottle.
Now I want to drink it.
They've only been running for a decade, for 12, 13 years. So we're not going to see the age stuff for a while yet.
But you think it's worth getting the cast strength and just a little dribble of water in there.
Just taste the water in it. Yeah.
You're coming to Seattle soon. I imagine you're going to bring stuff.
Oh, look at that. Listen to him beg. Listen to him beg.
I don't like to be that guy, but
I do the same thing.
I'm still trying to convince the boss to come with me, but I think we might pull that off. But are you saying, could I possibly have something unusual in my room?
I mean, you drive a car and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I still have the Clonic Kilty. I love it. It's very good. So.
Yeah. I think we had a pretty nice meal last time we were together in Seattle, and ended up convincing them to open up the cellar and pull a couple of very unusual whiskeys out.
I was able to remain upright for longer than I should have.
Because you only needed to make it upstairs. We were already in the Regency. Right?
Yeah.
Like you only have to stumble this far.
I'm surprised I wasn't like just pushed out of the elevator like trash.
I wouldn't have trusted us to get in a taxi that night. We didn't need to.
Yeah, it was not good. I mean, it was great, but
Yeah, there was definitely a moment that you said this. He's like, "What is happening?" It's like I'm negotiating.
Is this real life?
No,
this is what happens. You haven't seen someone in a while. It's exciting.
And then I connect with a good whiskey guy.
And we had that incredible, that night in Daniels.
In Daniels. It was a rodeo. It made 2 Windows Weekly episodes. Right, we talked about the Cellar Edition Maker's Mark and the Purple Topped Willet, which were both a great drink. I haven't bought those bottles.
You'll be shocked to know I find myself at a liquor store on a fairly regular basis, and every time I see the top of a Maker's Mark bottle, I smile. And and I think of that.
The wax tip.
I think of the wax.
We had a very special bottle that night. You don't usually get a chance to taste those.
Nice. Well, gents, you've done an admirable job of guiding this show to its final and just conclusion.
Which logical conclusion.
Logical conclusion. We're here. But we do this show
circular podcasting. That's what we do.
It's amazing. It's linear. We do this show every Wednesday, so you can come back next Wednesday for a fun edition, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific. That's 2 to 5 Eastern. That's 1800 UTC. The stream is live on YouTube, youtube.com/twit. And if you smash the bell, you will get a notification when we go live. We basically turn it on whenever a show goes live. I know, I'm with it. I'm with the kids.
You and your terminology.
I know. I'm taking influencer lessons from my son.
1 ringy dingy, 2 ringy dingy.
After the fact, on-demand versions of the show are available at twit.tv/dubdub or on YouTube. There's a Windows Weekly channel dedicated to the video. Easiest thing to do is subscribe in your favorite podcast player, either audio or video. That way you'll get it automatically the minute it's available. You'll find more of Richard Campbell and his podcasts, RunAs Radio and .NET Rocks, at his website, runasradio.com. Paul Thurrott lives and breathes technology at thurrott.com, THURRO.com. He's also got his books at leanpub.com, including Windows Everywhere and the Field Guide to Windows 11. And I guess next week will be normal.
Yep. I'll be home.
At least as normal as it can be.
It's getting kind of boring.
Yeah. I know. Well, I'm right at my limit, right? At 3 weeks, she starts looking at me like, don't you have somewhere to go?
A little twitchy.
Why are you still here?
The week after that, we'll both be away. That'll be fun.
Yeah,
then it'll be built. Yeah, in 2 weeks.
They might even be with us. Yeah. And then I'm home for a week. And then I just bought the ticket for June and I had to buy it in 3 pieces because it's Toronto, Oslo, Berlin, Missoula, Kansas City. Like it's the whole month.
That's the route everyone takes. It's
the whole month. Yeah.
Wow. You are in hot demand.
Yeah. But I'm staying home for the summer. The summer, you're going to get tired of me sitting, on the waterfront.
I'll never get tired of that view. I'll tell you.
Oh, no, I'll flip. I'm going to crank on the history.net. This is the summer, man. This is the summer I put it down.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
The loons, Norman. The loons.
I'm not saying we've heard this one before, but I do want this book to be finished desperately.
Yeah, me too. But so Shelter Point is just off to the right of that.
Oh.
I know, the other side of that island.
If you had a little boat, you could just putt over and get some whiskey.
Now, you know what? The seaplane would be great. Right? I get there in 25 minutes via, DH2 Beaver.
Nice.
Thanks to our Club TWiT members who are now all agog about the Eurovision Song Contest. And there is, in fact, a Eurovision channel in our Discord if you want to join ILAG and the rest for their chats about Eurovision.
So continental.
Oh, we're international, my friend.
There you go.
Simply go to twit.tv/clubtwit if you're not yet a member, and you will be a member in seconds. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a great week on Windows Weekly.